at times you'll find that it's going to be that one thing that's going to make this trade come home. Either you do it or that person doesn't come home. I think it's going to take some time to build it, but I think we're already on that glide path that one day will get us to the point where we raise the cost so high that they'll stop taking our citizens. We try to take a look at many options, and at times we want to do something that's not necessarily a person-to-person swap because they're so unpalatable. But I have had times where we've tried something that's a little more policy-related, and the other side's rejected it and pushed us back into the realm of person-to-person swaps. And sometimes you'll find the people that are holding our Americans, they get a vote, they hold the key to the jail cell.
While on travel to Nigeria, by invitation by their government, he was arrested, had his passport seized, and has received appalling treatment with his rights continually being violated. He wasn't even charged for a month. He now has malaria, should be in the hospital, not.
General, I'll always take more money, so if you...
That our Bureau, which is fee-funded, experienced a $902 million rescission this year.
First, we have the Honorable Rena, who is serving as the Assistant Secretary of Consular Affairs. Next, we have the Honorable Roger D. Carstens, who is serving as the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs since 2020. And lastly, we have Mr. Rajiv Maan, who is the Director of Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell.
There's a debate that is often raging on the Hill about the trade-off between making deals to return hostages or the wrongfully detained, under the understanding that the United States should not leave people behind, versus the notion that you're making deals might incentivize folks to detain more Americans. So I would love your views on that issue and whether you think we should continue to try to find ways of making deals when necessary to get our people home, and the impact of us stopping that policy on your jobs and how you think we would address that if we were not to approach deal making.
Ranking Member Crow, I hope you don't mind if I jump in and take that
first.
Please. These are always hard decisions. I think you take a case like what we had to do in Russia or what we've done in Venezuela. We actually spend years sometimes trying to divine what the other side wants, having very tough conversations with them. At times we come up with options that we present to the other side that are either given a yes, no, or a maybe. And as we struggle to get through this, at times you'll find that it's going to be that one thing that's going to make this trade come home. Either you do it or that person doesn't come home.
Tell us what we are doing specifically to take away the incentives for hostages to be taken in the future.
Congressman, I appreciate that question. We think deterrence is very important. We've got to come up with a way that raises the cost for these countries taking our citizens. I think it's going to take some time to build it, but I think we're already on that glide path that one day will get us to the point where we raise the cost so high that they'll stop taking our citizens. Right now, we're working with our partners and allies, most specifically the Canadians, who through their arbitrary detention initiative have brought countries to the fore, signing the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention and State-to-State Relations, currently signed by 76 countries in the European Union, trying to reestablish that norm that taking citizens and using them as political bargaining chips is just not something we should be doing. We've also established, along with the Canadians, an independent legal panel made up of high-level jurists who can start looking at some of the legal remedies that we might have to also put this problem to rest.
You heard earlier stated that this administration tends to play favorites, and they will go to save some hostages before others, including celebrities. And I think the basketball player Brittany Griner was mentioned. I'd just like, for the record, for you to tell us whether that is indeed a policy or a practice.
Ms. Congresswoman, thank you for that question. Under the Biden administration, we've brought back 47 Americans, and if you were to take a look at who's come back, you'd find an entire tapestry of what makes this country great. And that is, you will find people that are poor, rich, well-connected, not well-connected, people that are famous, not famous, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Muslim, Christian, agnostic, atheist. It's this entire array of everyone who makes up our country. And so even though I can understand the perspective of someone who's outside looking in, to my mind, we work just as hard to take care of someone who lives maybe in an economically poor situation in maybe the rural South, just as we would for someone who might come from wealth and who might be connected in the Northeast. We don't care. If that case is wrongfully detained, we are going to pursue it like bulldogs.
Can you identify specifically any that you have had to deal with in either administration that you've worked in where they specifically rejected the idea of some kind of aid or having some aid taken away from them, said, we're not interested in that as a negotiation, we just want this person or this group of persons or whatever?
Mr. Chairman, yes. I've had that happen before. I can think of negotiations where we went in hoping that a certain policy option, in this case, we decided a policy option might be the way to go forward. And yet putting that on the table, the other side wanted to conduct a person-to-person swap. I think as we talked, we try to take a look at many options, and at times we want to do something that's not necessarily a person-to-person swap because they're so unpalatable. But I have had times where we've tried something that's a little more policy-related, and the other side's rejected it and pushed us back into the realm of person-to-person swaps.
I wanted to come back to something that you mentioned about this being a global problem and needing a global solution. And if you could expand a bit upon that to give us some insight into what you think a broader response, pulling together all of our capacity, both with folks who we agree with and folks we disagree with, to try and set some standards and some rules of the road and bring to bear international pressure when hostage taking occurs or wrongfully detained occurrences.
Congressman, thank you for that. Now, and I would like to say that it was an honor to work with you to bring Brittany Griner home. I know you've also been working on Deborah Tice. And in fact, if I may out you, you've come to talk to me about cases that fell outside your jurisdiction. I think once you get involved in this business, you start to keep coming back to help. And I appreciate the broader support you've given us outside those who live in your district. I'd also like to say I appreciated your care for Paul Whelan too. And you're right, every time we talked about Brittany Griner, we were talking about Paul and others. And so the enemy gets a vote, as we used to say when I was in the military. And sometimes you'll find the people that are holding our Americans, they get a vote, they hold the key to the jail cell, and it's a pleasure to work together with you to find the ways to break that out.
I'm here to address a very serious issue about one of my constituents. Mr. Carstens, I sent you as well as the President and Secretary of the State a letter on June 4th requesting that the matter of Tigran Gambaryan detainment be transferred to your office. I also wrote and received a response regarding Deputy Secretary Kurt Campbell's trip to Nigeria asking whether he discussed Tigran's case with their government. Tigran is my constituent, his wife and his 2 kids, and previously he served as an IRS agent taking high-level cases before working as a compliance executive at Binance. As you know, while on travel to Nigeria, by invitation by their government, he was arrested, had his passport seized, and has received appalling treatment with his rights continually being violated. He wasn't even charged for a month. He now has malaria, should be in the hospital, not. He's been lied about. We do have people in contact with him, but absolutely appalling circumstances. An American citizen. Most recently, Tigran contracted malaria while there. Despite a court order to the contrary, he has received less than adequate treatment, and it's time for him to come home. Special Envoy Carstens, in your view, does Mr. Gambaryan meet the criteria of a U.S. citizen wrongfully detained by a foreign government pursuant to the Robert Levingston Hostage Recovery and Hostage Taking Accountability Act?
Congressman, I hope you don't mind. I'll start off, and then Assistant Secretary Bitter may want to jump in, or maybe even Raj. But I would say that these cases are, they might from the outside seem opaque, that it's hard for people to figure out where we are in the map sheet as we go through this. And a lot of that's because the cases are not static. We keep finding information out over time.
Let me interrupt because we only have so much time. I have 3 more minutes because I'll cite your own code. Mm-hmm. And that way you can tell me if it applies or not. Or I'll probably just tell you because it's pretty obvious to me. Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to submit to the record Section 1741 of Title 22 of the United States Code, please.
Without objection.
Thank you. Let's go through Section 1741 of Title 22, which you guys are pursuant to. Answer the questions to Mr. Gambaryan's case if it falls under these 8 criteria listed. Clause 1A, do United States officials receive or possess credible information indicating the innocence of the detained individual? Yes. Clause 5A, is the individual being detained in violation of laws of the detaining country? Yes. We know that for a fact. Clause 6A, are independent non-government organizations or journalists raised legitimate questions about the innocence of the detained individual? Yes. Clause 7A, is the individual or the United States mission in the country where the individual is being detained received credible reports that detention is a pretext for an illegitimate purpose? Yes. Clause 8A, has the individual detained in a country where the Department of State has determined in its annual human rights reports that the judicial system is not independent or impartial, is susceptible to corruption, or is incapable of rendering just verdicts? Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to insert this report, 2023 Country Reports on Human Rights Practices, Nigeria, for the record.
Without objection.
This report finds that Nigeria has arbitrary arrests or detention, serious problems with the independent judiciary, and a lot more than that. That's just one more section. Clause 9A, is the individual being detained in inhumane conditions? Yes. Not only is he not receiving adequate treatment for malaria, but in prison he's being held in a place that was built to hold Boko Haram and ISIS people, terrorists basically, as basically a businessman who was coaxed there under false pretense. Clause 10A, has due process of the law been sufficiently impaired so as to render the detention arbitrary? Yes. Held for a month, passport confiscated, no charges, no medical treatment. This is a U.S. citizen. Clause 11A, is the United States diplomatic engagement likely necessary to secure the release of the detained individual? Absolutely. Absolutely, was he saying in the military. If he was your parent or your son, I would make the case this would have already been elevated. If it was somebody of interest to the president or the secretary, this would have already been elevated. He is a U.S. citizen. If I was in Rome, back in Roman times, and I was Paul, the apostle, I'd say, I am a Roman citizen, and all of a sudden it goes where? To the emperor. Because I'm a citizen. This guy deserves better. Secretary Bitter, with it being established that Mr. Gambarian meets the criteria of wrongfully detained U.S. person, according to this old code, that's 8 sections of the code, can I ask for your avocation to elevate this to where it belongs so we can actually get something done for this poor guy who was coaxed in under false pretense to be charged illegitimately after waiting for a month? Please.
Thank you so much, Representative McCormick. And I also just want to acknowledge that the statement that you read the other day on behalf of his wife was very moving, and I appreciate you reading that into the record, and it was really very meaningful to hear. I think we're watching this case closely. We talk about this case quite frequently. And just to back up a little bit, 2 things to be aware of. We are aware of his medical condition. We've asked for humanitarian release based on his malaria. And also, just so you know, our colleagues in Nigeria have visited him, I think, at least 9 times since he was arrested just a couple of months ago. We know that there's a hearing upcoming that we will certainly be attending. So just to assure you and to assure Mrs. Gambarian as well, that this is something we are tracking really, really closely. We're watching the proceedings, and we're watching very carefully his health.
So I'm going to ask you again, will you advocate to elevate this to Special Envoy Carstens?
Thank you again. And as the way that we work together is that we talk about these cases all of the time.
Are you advocating to elevate this, ma'am? It's a simple question.
No, I appreciate that. I understand what you're saying. And I just want to be clear that this is something
I know you're concerned.
Mr. McCormick, your time has expired, but there will be another round coming up here that you will have an opportunity if you wish to continue your line of questioning.
So do you feel that the agreement made with Iran amounted to a ransom payment for the release of American detainees? Mr. Cass?
Ranking Member Meeks, thank you for your comments, and thank you for that question as well. And I appreciate the support that you've given this entire enterprise over the last few years, and grateful for a chance to be at this hearing today and answer that question. I think for starters, and I think you already know this, that the Office of the Special Envoy for Iran led the negotiation. In this case, my office was responsible for, you could almost say, the logistics and the safe movement and medical care of people coming back from Iran, back to the United States, where they went into post-isolation support. But what I can say about the deal is that right now there are 5 Americans that are home with their families in the United States of America, and there's $6.2 billion where not $1 has spent. It is sitting safely secure in Qatar, overwatched by the Department of Treasury.
Any advices that you want to give on where you think Congress should offer something more to assist with that, to assist with some resource, some authority you feel like you might need to better conduct these operations?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll always take more money, so if you... but to be honest, I think
I appreciate that,
yeah.
but I certainly expect a more thoughtful answer than you want more money.
I think you might have the wrong guy. As I said, I'm not that smart. But I will say, what the good thing about this is you asked us to do this, and we took that seriously because we spend so much time with the families, and sometimes you'll sit there and feel the tension of not being able to say just a little more. And so what you asked of us, we were in a way kind of eager to do. And so thanks to Congress and the authorities that you have given us, we've been trying to turn that into, I guess, action and actually have these people with us almost full time to declassify the information. So if there are ways that we can come up with that will speed up the process or increase our ability to provide this information, I'd love to explore that with your teams. But we hope that we're kind of hitting the mark on your expectations in this regard.
Ambassador Bitter, could you talk to us for a moment about the role of these travel advisories in attempts to warn Americans about the risk of wrongful detention, how you arrive at these determinations?
Thank you, Representative Crowe. I'd be happy to. First of all, one thing I should say is just to thank this committee, thank the members of this committee and other members of Congress. Our travel advice, again, as I said, is really the service that we provide to Americans before they leave the country in order to help them make decisions about their safety and security when traveling overseas. Many members of this committee have amplified our travel advice. We work very closely with your constituent services teams in order to be able to share information that you can share with your constituents. We consider your constituents our constituents, so we're always very grateful about that. It's true, one of the things that we advise about all kinds of risks to Americans in our travel advice. Crime, maybe even the state of the medical system there, natural disasters, terrorism, and recently working with a broad array of State Department offices, we've included a D indicator to alert Americans when they may be visiting a country that does participate in wrongful detention. The D indicator is, there are really basically 2 reasons that we would include it, and we very thoughtfully worked with our colleagues across the department to identify them. If there is a wrongful detainee, and also a credible ongoing risk of wrongful detention, which is not unique to an individual person. And in some instances, and you've mentioned them, for example, North Korea, there may not be a wrongful detainee there currently, but there is a credible ongoing risk. So if we see that, those 2 indicators in place, we'll put a D indicator on the travel advice.
Thank you. And currently, the House Republicans' proposal for the State and Foreign Ops bill has a proposed 11% cut to the State Department. How would such a cut impact your staff and your team and your ability to perform the work at the level that you would envision it to be performed within the context of wrongful detained and hostages?
Well, thanks for the question. And again, it's within this context, but everything that we do, we are part of the State Department, and we just happen to be the forward deployed arm of providing public services. But it is something that everybody in the State Department is part of. We rely completely on the strength of the State Department in order to be able to do what we do. You're probably aware that we're fee funded, but again, we rely on the folks that do the computers, the hiring, everything. We sit on the platform that the State Department has. The thinner the platform, the weaker it is, the less we're able to do for your constituents. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that our Bureau, which is fee-funded, experienced a $902 million rescission this year.
Yeah, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe. This will continue in a classified setting. I don't necessarily need a closing statement. I don't know if you need a then I'll just close this out in the formal way that we need to before we move to the classified setting. I thank the witnesses for your testimony. Really do thank you for your testimony today. Without objection, this committee in this portion stands adjourned.